Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Good Coach, Bad Coach. The secrets that great coaches know that the other coaches never figure out. I'm a super coach, Michael Burt. Follow me at Michael Burt. I appreciate you coming every Sunday night at 6 p.m. You can watch this show on the BurtNetwork.com. Let me say that again. That's BurtNetwork.com. This is my 24-hour online success network where people of interest play. You can find all of my shows there. Super Coach, Good Coach, Bad Coach. We're getting ready to bring Working for a Monster. We've also got the Pressure Cooker, which is a brand new show we have out too on how to handle pressure situations. Tonight we're talking about something that I think every coach in America needs to know if you're in the good coaching business. Now, that is, how do you manage and mitigate or get rid of team dysfunction? If you're a manager, if you're a coach, from middle school to high school to college to professionals, here's what I would tell you. Every team in America has dysfunction on it. And let me tell you the seed of that. We are imperfect people, and we live in an imperfect world. When we put people together with different backgrounds and different biases and different assumptions and different prejudgments, all we really do is we compound the dysfunction. So how do we as a coach manage this dysfunction? See, here's the difference between a good coach and a bad coach. The good coach understands and can pinpoint quickly where the missing structures and the team dysfunction is. The bad coach just knows they got a big mess on their hands and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to find it. They don't know how to manage it. They don't know how to mitigate it. Now, I created this program for one simple reason. I was a championship coach that took a pretty good program and turned it into a great program, a national program, a state championship program over a 10-year period. I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of mistakes. But one thing that was not a mistake that we did, that we had daily success academies, daily leadership academies. We worked on the body, the mind, the heart, and the spirit of our players. And when you think about this whole person, I want you to think about when someone gets a broken heart or becomes dispirited. They have a broken spirit or a broken heart. This can happen in the workplace and it can happen on a team. What happens is people check out. And when they check out, they don't give their best self. So here's my strategy on how to manage dysfunction. First thing you got to do, first step, is you got to recognize it. We used to have a saying, I think it was Don Myers that used to say, recognize, admit, learn, and forget. Lots of people that create dysfunction never even know that they're the one that's bringing it to the party. So the first step is you got to recognize it. Second step is you got to manage it. Third step is you got to figure out if you can live with it or it's an emotional cancer that is metastasizing through the organization and spreading. So how do we know what dysfunction you have? I always teach people that I use the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of Teams by Patrick Lencioni. This is a book that transcends business and sport. So what I would do as a coach is I would learn these 5 key dysfunctions. Now there's more than 5. And if every team is dysfunctional, you're going to find all kinds of dysfunction within a team. But Lencioni said there were 5. And I'm going to share those 5 with you today so that you can quickly recognize which dysfunction you have. In the second segment, I'm going to show you how to overcome these dysfunction. First dysfunction is absence of trust. Absence of trust. Now, there's 2 ways to look at trust. One is the best predictor of future behavior is past relevant behavior. I.e., I know to trust you in the future based on my past with you. Let's call that the Dr. Phil version of trust. The Patrick Lencioni version of trust is that when we have an absence of trust, we are less vulnerable to each other. You see, what he talks about in the 5 dysfunctions of teams is this. When you have a high degree of trust, you're vulnerable to each other. See, I know you're not good at things. You know I'm not good at things. I have weaknesses. You have weaknesses. But here's the deal. We don't judge each other. We accept each other. Now, think about a person that's married, how they see the good, the bad, and the ugly of their spouse. They see them at their best points and at their worst moments. They love them unconditionally. Lencioni is saying great teams have this level of trust that they're completely vulnerable to each other. They believe in each other. So the first dysfunction is absence of trust. We got no trust, therefore we don't have a foundation. And he puts it in a pyramid from low dysfunction to high dysfunction. Number 2, which I think is a big one, fear of conflict. Now, if you're a coach and you are afraid to address unmet expectation on your team, i.e., you do not confront people who don't do what they're supposed to do, you're never going to be a great coach. Bad coaches tolerate things. Remember this, we encourage what we allow. So the second dysfunction of team is I got a fear of conflict. I'm afraid to address unmet expectation. And because of that, I let things go, which leads to the third dysfunction of teams, which is avoidance of accountability, lack of commitment. Avoidance of accountability is I don't hold people accountable. And because I don't hold people accountable, most likely because they got a lack of commitment, we got all kinds of shenanigans going on this team. There's undermining, there's backstabbing, there's hidden agendas, there's low levels of commitment, malicious obedience, there's emotional cancers. All of these things are going on as it relates to a bad team. So let's look at these. We got absence of trust. We got a fear of conflict. We got a lack of commitment. We got avoidance of accountability. Then that leads us to the fifth dysfunction, which is status and ego. This is where one member of the team or multiple members of the team begins to believe they are bigger than the entire team. They have got an ego. They've got a status that is elevated, that is bigger. Now, in the business world, I teach people to elevate their status. But on a team environment, and in a team environment, you cannot have one person that simply treats themselves differently than everybody else. Here's the biggest risk for people who have this dysfunction. You know who it is? Simple. It's your best players. You see, your best players are coddled. Your best players get all the attention. Your best players get all the energy. Your best players get all the focus. So they begin to believe that without them, there's no way this whole thing would work. And in some cases, that's true. Those are the 5 dysfunctions of teams. So here's what I want you to do. As a good coach, you need to master and understand these 5 dysfunctions. Because your team may put the fun in dysfunction. When I come back in segment number 2, here's what I'm going to talk about. Now that we know the 5 dysfunctions of teams, what are we going to do about it? Because I would teach every one of my players every year these 5 dysfunctions. And then I'm going to show you a trick I used from Jim Collins in Good to Great, how I put these 2 concepts together to make sure my team managed and mitigated every dysfunction that would cost us a championship. I'm Coach Michael Burt, and you're watching The Super Coach on Good Coach, Bad Coach. Hey, this is Coach Michael Burt, and I have a prediction. Within the next 5 years, every manager in the world will have to become a coach. You know, a good coach will do 3 things for you. They make you have conversations you don't want to have. They make you do some things you don't want to do. They'll help you become something you didn't think you could become. This transition, what I call the coaching revolution, prompted me to create a program called Turn Your Managers into Coaches. What we want to do is drive up engagement, drive up production. We want to become a manager other people want to follow. If you've got managers out there that you want to turn into coaches that engage people in systematic behaviors that allows them to do something tomorrow they simply cannot do today, pick up the phone and call us, 225-8380, 615-225-8380, or email us at info@coachburt.com, and we're going to teach you how to turn your managers into great coaches. Welcome back, Good Coach, Bad Coach, Sunday night, 6 p.m. Thank you for joining me. This has been one of our most popular shows, and I really got the concept from this show because one of my unique abilities is extracting ideas from over here and bringing them over here. That's one of the things I did as hopefully a good coach in my 10 years as a head coach and 15 years of coaching, is I would go over to the business world and pluck an idea and bring it over to the athletic world. Therefore, I went over and got Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what the rich teach their kids that the poor and middle class never do. And I said, hey, why did 30 million people buy this book? Well, they bought it because They compared and contrasted. Robert Kiyosaki compared and contrasted the habits that the rich teach their kids that the poor and middle class never do. What if I could share habits of good coaches and habits of bad coaches so that you'd never want to be a bad coach again? You say, well, what qualifies you? Well, what qualifies me is 10 years as a head coach, winning 74.9% of our games, 1 championship, 4 conference titles, 3 sub-state appearances, wrote the book, The Anatomy of Winning, with 10-time championship coach and Hall of Famer Rick Insell. Also the book, Changing Lives Through Coaching, The Inspirational Leader, because I believe that everybody needs a good coach in life. I now have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and trust me, I want my daughter to have great coaches. Now, here's the topic tonight, team dysfunction. Every team in America is dysfunctional. Every family in America is dysfunctional. We are imperfect people, and we live in an imperfect world. Imperfect people in an imperfect world. When you put us in the context of a team, you compound the dysfunction. Every person has a personal bias, a prejudgment, pre-assumptions that they bring to the table. Now, your job as the coach, the good coach, is to find the dysfunction, manage the dysfunction, and mitigate the dysfunction. Make it smaller. You're never going to get rid of it. So even the most winning teams in the world, the biggest championship teams in the world, are dysfunctional. But their coaches are great at managing the dysfunction. Now, in first segment, I told you what the dysfunctions were. So now let me tell you what to do about them. Number 1, absence of trust. What do you do when you have a team that has an absence of trust? You'll never win any games. Stephen M.R. Covey said this: there's nothing faster than the speed of trust. There's nothing slower than a lack of trust. When you have no trust, you have no buy-in. And no buy-in means I won't commit. I'm not all in. Okay? I can show up and be there, but I quit, but I forgot to tell anybody. You know why? We're not sold on each other. We don't believe in each other. So the way you get over absence of trust is you teach the concept of the emotional bank account. And the emotional bank account says that every person has a bank account, that money is not the currency, trust is. So we build trust by depositing into the emotional bank account of other people. Now, here was my strategy as a coach. I wanted to deposit so much trust in the emotional bank account of my players that they would run through the wall for me. This is a personal investment in them. The emotional bank account had to be strong for them to play hard for us. If you don't have this emotional bank account, or it's overdrawn, or bankrupt, or there's no trust, you got to go to work here, man. Because a team that doesn't trust each other is going to do one thing: underperform. So the first thing you got to do is you got to build the emotional bank account. Fear of conflict, second dysfunction of team. Here's what you got to do. You have to address unmet expectation, which implies that you have set expectation. We had a couple rules when I was coaching. Don't do anything to embarrass yourself. If you embarrass yourself, you embarrass your family, you embarrass us. Number 2, be 15 minutes early to everything. If you're not 15 minutes early, you don't get in the meeting. If you don't get in the meeting, you don't practice. And if you don't practice, guess what you don't do? You don't play. Now, I didn't have anybody late in 10 years, maybe 1 or 2 people. But guess what? They were so afraid of being late, they showed up 15 minutes early to everything. That is called expectation. When there was unmet expectation, we did not perform to the level we wanted to, I would simply tell my team, look, I'm not going to coach some people that don't want to win championships. So I just pack it up and go to the house. They'd say, no, coach, no. You don't want to win that bad, or you wouldn't put forth this mediocre performance. So fear of conflict is real simple. If you have a desire to be liked by everybody, you'll never be a great coach. You're going to have to make tough calls and tough decisions. You're going to solve problems and make decisions. So here's the way you do this. You set high expectation. And when people don't meet it or start to slip, you have to address the expectation. Number 3, let's call it lack of commitment. Lack of commitments where some people are bought in, but other people are not bought in. This is simple, guys. I built all kinds of peer-to-peer accountability. I wanted the players to police themselves. Police themselves. So I got leaders on the inside policing each other by peer-to-peer accountability. So I built such strong peer-to-peer accountability. If you wasn't in, you was out. And if you're on the outside looking in, that ain't a good place to be. I do the same thing in the business world today with scoreboards and planners and mechanisms that hold people accountable. And if you ain't on board the train, you're slowing the train down. You're probably going to want to get off the train. So the way you hold people accountable to commitment is, number one, you show up and be committed. I used to ask my players, the chicken lays an egg and she's involved. The hog gives his meat and he's committed. Which are you, the chicken or the hog? Are you part way in or are you all the way in? Number 4, dysfunction, avoidance of accountability. Here's the deal, coaches. You can't hold some people accountable, not other people. Now, here's the deal. You're naturally going to like some players over others. Your personality is going to jee-haw with some better than others. You're going to naturally gravitate towards some better than others. And you know which ones you're going to gravitate to? The ones that are open, humble, coachable, and have a great work ethic. There's going to be some you don't like. But here's the deal. You got to hold them all accountable. When a bad coach does not hold a player accountable, it actually erodes the respect and trust of the other players. What they start saying is, why won't coach hold them accountable? They let them do whatever they want to. Why do they get to do whatever they want to? Well, here's the deal. That erodes your trust as a leader. So the 4th thing you got to do is you got to hold everybody accountable. And you not got to like everybody, but you got to hold them all accountable. Now, status and ego, the 5th dysfunction. What do you do when you have this dysfunction? Here's what I used to do. When my players that weren't so good used to complain about my great players, they would say, Coach, why do they get all the attention? Why do they get to get in the newspaper all the time? Why do they get all of this? I would say, because they're the best player. And when you create action and energy and circulation and movement, you get more attention. But here's the deal. I tell you what we'll do. On Friday night, we won't play with them. We'll just pull them out of the rotation. Do you believe we can win without our best players? They'd say, no, Coach, no, we got to have our best players. And I say, hold on a second. Why are you in here complaining about them? Because you're jealous about them. You're envious of them. Replace that jealousy and envy. Quit drinking the haterade and get out there and do your job so that other people are envious of you. But every now and then, that best player who had a little status and a little ego would complain about those other players and say, Coach, I can't believe they can't catch the ball or score like I do. And I'd say, tell you what, we're going to take them all out of the equation, and we're going to let you play by yourself on Friday night. Do you think you can win by yourself? And they'd say, no, Coach, I didn't mean that. Then I'd bring them all together, and I would say, I don't want to hear you complain about each other again. Here's the simple, cold, hard truth. You have got to have each other to win. No more complaining. No more griping. No more undermining. Now, I want to finish with this concept of the red flag. Jim Collins, in his book, Good to Great. Great book. Leaves out a few things. Talks about if we get the right people on the bus, okay, get the wrong people off the bus, hey, whole world's going to be a great place. I agree to some extent. But here's what Jim Collins does not talk about. What do we do with the right players? Who coaches and develops the right players? See, a good coach will coach you in knowledge, will coach you in skill, they'll coach you in desire, they'll coach you in confidence. A good coach will take you lower level of resources to higher levels of productivity. That's what a good coach will do. They'll elevate. See, the reason we practice is to extend our limits. We all have limits, but we practice to go beyond those limits. Well, let me tell you what he also talked about in the book. He talked about the concept of a red flag. If any time somebody is doing something that would prohibit our team from winning, anybody on the team has the ability to throw the red flag. And the red flag just says, hold on, stop just a minute. Let's put this thing back in the box that it came in. So I used to tell my players, after we taught the 5 dysfunctions of teams and we brought a higher awareness and peer-to-peer accountability, I used to say this. If at any time any of our players suspects that we are practicing one of these 5 dysfunctions, you can throw the red flag. And that puts a halt on everything until we address and mitigate and manage the team dysfunction. Now let me ask you a question, good coaches. If you aspire to be a good coach out there, would you not master the 5 dysfunctions of teams so that you can teach it to your players, so that you can teach it to your team, so that you recognize it, you manage it, you mitigate it? We're imperfect people living in an imperfect world. Good coaches know this, and they go into the equation knowing that their job is to manage and rid the team of these dysfunctions. That book was written by Patrick Lencioni. Great book. I'm upset that I didn't write it, but it's a great book. The other book was Good to Great by Jim Collins that I referenced tonight. I'm bringing business principles to the athletic world and athletic principles to the business world. This is Coach Michael Burt. If you're serious, get out there and get you a copy of The Anatomy of Winning. We got it on DVD. We got it on CD. We got it in book form. Go to CoachBurt.com and come back every Sunday night, either here or on iTunes, for Good Coach, Bad Coach. Secrets the great coaches know that the others never figure out.